Well, a big Shabbat Shalom to all of you here today and to all of you who will be watching on the YouTube and on the Rumble. Welcome to the river. We wish you a blessed Shabbat and a blessed day if you're watching this after the Shabbat. Either way, we hope you are blessed and that the Father's hand is over you all. A treasured possession, part 3. I've called this one Uncovering Shame. We will see as to why I've titled it this today as we go through the teaching. I was just thinking in my quiet time just about the direction and the flow that the teachings have taken since River Branch went officially live last, Gregorian year, right after the Feast of Tabernacles. And it's been really interesting to see the journey that the teachings have been taking us on. And how the Ruach has really guided us. And Curtis and I were talking about this, but essentially he's been guiding us to the lead up of unleavened bread. All of the teachings, in establishing how this community is operating and all the other teachings, where we're looking at this plan of redemption, we realized, wow, this is one big journey leading up to unleavened bread. Almost as if the question has been put forward to us of, okay, you're here now. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What choices are you going to make now that you are here? And with this particular teaching series, it's been really interesting to see how essentially it's a cursory look or a bird's eye view look of the plan of redemption. And it's amazing whenever I do a teaching like this, how often I find myself saying this, that we're essentially going to look at this thread starting from, the beginning and going right the way and giving an overview of the house of Israel and their history and their future, a house that was given great honor to be in covenant with Yah, and then essentially drop the ball, fall into complacency, which would then lead to spiritual adultery, which would then lead to a scattering. And here we are now in what I believe is the tail end of the scattering, awaiting the soon to be fulfilled fall appointed times. And again, like I just said, it's amazing how many times I find myself saying this. We're going to look at the overview of the plan of redemption, but every time we look at this plan of redemption, it's like we look at it from a different angle, and there's new depth added to our current understanding. And it just, again, it's a reminder of truly how simple the faith is, and at its reduced complexity, how simple the plan of redemption is. But every time we re-look at this plan of redemption, we get this new depth added on. So it's simple, but, almost infinitely deep. And every time we revisit this plan of redemption, we just get these new ways of looking at it, these nuances that kind of build one upon the other. And lo and behold, here we are re-looking at the plan of redemption from this treasured possession perspective. And yet again, it's saying the same thing, but adding these extra little details, these nuances. And in particular with this revisit of the plan of redemption, really this thing of, well, what are we going to do now? Especially as we prepare ourselves for unleavened bread, which is only about 11 weeks away, maybe not even. So it's soon fast approaching upon us. So with that being said, let's quickly recap on part 2, what we covered last week, and then we'll jump into today's teaching. Part 1, we looked at there's going to be a treasured possession, and we looked at, the gold of gold and the silver of silver. And we saw in part 1 that essentially the treasured possession, the bride of Messiah, wisdom, the wisdom from above, will be one of the key characteristics. Now, in part two, we looked at this thing of if you're not wise, what are you? And biblically, that would make you a fool. And we looked at what the biblical definition of what a fool is, as opposed to our preconceived idea of what foolishness may be. And so we saw these character traits of what a biblical fool is, and at the root of biblical folly, it exposes that one doesn't fear Yah. If you do not fear Yah, then you're going to get a cascade of behaviors that stem forth from that, which will manifest itself into biblical foolishness. But one of the roots of this, and arguably the foundation of biblical foolishness, is a lack of the fear of Elohim. Self is on the throne, and arguably you have made yourself Elohim. As a result of that, because you think you've made yourself your own Elohim, this means you think you know best, and therefore you will not heed reproof, nor be accountable to anyone due to pride. And unfortunately, this is a behavior that is far too common in the body of Messiah and in the religious world. Pride is at the root of this, and this pride ultimately makes you create yourself as Elohim. No different than what is spoken of in the prophet Ezekiel, you know, speaking of this cherub that walked amongst the fiery stones, and due to his pride, he lifted himself up and iniquity was found in him. And so biblical folly essentially leads us to lead in the footsteps of the father of all lies, the adversary. A fool is prone to spiritual adultery. In fact, it's like they run to it because it's the easiest thing. You know, spiritual adultery will satisfy the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. It satisfies this fallen nature of ours. And so that's why when you're a biblical fool, not only are you prone to spiritual adultery, but you will run to it. Now, you can be prone to spiritual adultery either because of folly or because you are simple, i.e. young in the faith. We saw this word simple, pati, in the Hebrew, that one can be simple due to biblical folly or just due to not knowing any better and being young in the faith, or sometimes a combination of the two. Unfortunately, the fool has a trail of destruction that follows him wherever he goes. And again, unfortunately, this is all too common in the body of Messiah. No matter what side of the river you look on, there's just bad fruit all over the place. But fools will have bad fruit follow them wherever they go. The fool is like an empty barrel, and empty barrels make the most noise. So, you know, it's a saying that I've picked up over the years that I'm particularly fond of. Empty barrels make the most noise. And usually you will find that biblical fools, they're the most vocal, especially when you factor in what we've just said, that a fool is prideful and they've made themselves their own Elohim and they think they know best. And therefore they feel and take it upon themselves that they need to go and correct everybody according to their understanding. And so, unfortunately, fools are often the most vocal. The fool will put others below him with his words, and certainly up here and in their hearts. You know, our words can be likened to the sword, you know, and what are we doing swinging this sword, lobbing people's ears off, so to speak? But not only will a fool do that with his words, remember that the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. So if the fool is cutting people down with their words and putting people below them with their words, know that that's actually coming from a heart condition. They've already put themselves above everybody else. And again, this pride that it characterizes a biblical fool. We saw that a fool mocks at guilt, and the word used for guilt in the Hebrew is the word asham. And asham can mean guilt in the traditional sense, but it can also mean the guilt offering, which means that there's a double entendre. There's two ways of understanding the fool will mock at guilt. The first one is that a fool does not believe he's ever done nothing wrong. You know, again, this pride. And as a result of that, a trail of bad fruit follows. But if you read it with the understanding of the fool mocks at the guilt offering or the trespass offering, depending on your translation, the trespass or guilt offering had restitution at the heart of it. And so if you read it that way, a fool actually scorns and despises restitution. Because they don't think they've done anything wrong, but that as a result of this, they actually flout their responsibility to a community, which means that they're actually a burden and a danger to a community and a group of believers. And this is why we get warnings in the apostolic writings regarding savage wolves that will come among us, sparing not the flock. If someone is truly a fool, there's only so much you can do. As the book of Proverbs says, do not answer a fool to his folly, lest you yourself get injured. There's only so much you can do. If someone is truly in a space of biblical folly, you know, the Apostle Paul would say, warn them once, warn them twice, and after that, be done with them. Hand them over to their delusion. A fool, interestingly, will project his own behavior onto others, which means that they end up becoming the accuser of the brethren. Who here has found that when they're dealing with someone in a state of folly, the very things they're accusing you of are the very things that they're guilty of themselves? In fact, they're doing the very thing that they're accusing you of, and you're looking in wonderment and going, how can you not see this? Because they're in a state of biblical folly. Fools will project their own behaviors onto others because, again, pride, they don't fear Elohim, and then there's pride, and they've made themselves Elohim. And every voice in their head is the Spirit talking to them. Foolishness leads to complacency. And Proverbs 121 says, or is it 126, around that area, the complacency of fools will destroy them. And I believe this is judgment seat of Messiah speak. Ultimately, fools are a burden and a liability to a community. And again, hence what we covered in the First Timothy series, you know, warn them once, warn them twice, be done with them. There's only so much you can do. If you can't do anything with them, only Elohim can do something with them. And he will use the adversary and a fool's own folly to reprove them. Another warning, and this one is particularly, we need to heed it. Fellowship with fools will actually hinder your ability to discern. And again, another proverb I've picked up over the years, a modern one, is that if you lay down with dogs, you will rise up with fleas. There's only so long you can associate with folly and it not start rubbing off on you. You know, we also have this modern saying, bad company corrupts good morals. Again, there's a lot of truth to these. These are just modern expressions of biblical wisdom. And unfortunately, the longer you hang around with fools, the more foolish you will become yourself. That folly will rub off on you. We have to remember that in our fallen state, we are prone to spiritual adultery. Our fallen state is geared towards it. And so this is why we're told to guard our hearts, to guard our minds, to make every thought captive to Messiah. Because even the best of us and the most mature of us, and even King Solomon, the wisest man to ever walk this earth, bar Messiah, he fell foul to spiritual adultery. And that was because of the wives that he was entertaining and who he was essentially having fellowship with. It only was so long before it rubbed off on him. And so this particular point, we need to heed. You know, this is why we're told, come out of her, my people. It doesn't say fix Mystery Babylon. It doesn't say right the wrongs of Rome or right the wrongs of Christianity or Judaism or the Messianics and Hebrew uprooters. It says come out of it. Why? Because eventually that behavior will rub off on you. Biblical foolishness, and this is another very important point, has zero to do with intelligence. It is a matter of character and decision making. You know, in fact, some of the more intelligent a biblical fool is, I would say, the more dangerous they are, because they can use their intelligence to reason away their folly. They use their intelligence to go, well, you know, I can't be a fool because of X, Y, and Z. And so it's one thing being a fool, it's quite another being an intelligent fool. And they can be some of the most destructive biblical fools that we will encounter because, again, they will use their intelligence to reason away their folly. The end result at the end of it all, and I believe this is judgment seat of Messiah speak, the wise will inherit honor, but fools get disgrace. Think honor and shame. We know that there is an inheritance for those that will overcome. And as we mentioned in part 1, this treasured possession will have wisdom inside it. And that wisdom will flow forth from their hearts, off their lips, so that they can then give it unto others. And as a result, they can be of use in the age to come. They will have an inheritance. But a fool will get shame. You know, think of those outside of the wedding feast weeping and gnashing their teeth. We saw Messiah's warning, the warning of those who hate their brother without a cause and call them a fool. And we saw that, the word used in the Greek there was moros, but the Hebrew equivalent in the Hebrew gospel was this word pati, someone who's simple, naive, and easily seduced. And this word pati in the book of Proverbs was used synonymously with a biblical fool. And the point that we made was that actually what Messiah is warning of here is that, remember that a fool will project their own behavior onto others. So you have someone that's being a biblical fool, and they're projecting that onto others and saying, you're the fool. And he's saying, be very careful of that, because you'll be liable to the fire of Gehenna for that kind of stuff. And that there's a huge parallel here to the sin of Cain, because Cain hated his brother without a cause. Abel did nothing wrong. His very existence shone a light into Cain's life, right? Cain's decisions shone a light into Cain's folly. And what Cain did was, take the perceived problem out the equation. And again, showing that biblical fools are actually a liability unto others. With the foundational understanding of biblical folly from the Tanakh, this means that every time you see a reference to a fool or foolishness in the Brit, these are based upon the understanding of fools and foolishness found in the book of Proverbs. And we've got numerous examples, but the ones I raised was the fool who built his house on the sand. He made a foolish decision. He thought he knew best, and he built his house upon the sand, and great was its fall. Foolish questions that Paul warns of in Titus and 2 Timothy that breed strife and division. And what Messiah speaks of, the parable of the 10 virgins, and that 5 of them were foolish. You need to plug in the understanding that we covered in part 2 to whenever you see in the Brit Chadashah mentions or references to fools and folly. Nothing to do with intelligence. everything to do with character and the inability to make wise decisions. And this is the question we finish part 2 on. What is the historical and biblical example of where folly will lead? And we see this in the history of the house of Israel. Now, what we're going to cover today, we're going to look at a bit of a historical perspective of the house of Israel. And that's actually going to lay a foundation for what we're going to cover next week, because we're going to look at this historical account of where biblical folly will lead, how that worked itself through the house of Israel, and where ultimately the house of Israel will be taken into captivity. But that will lay a solid foundation. I believe what we're going to cover today is actually the shadow picture to the greater, weightier matter. So we're actually going to dive fairly deep next week. We're going to take this historical account and we're going to take it right back to the garden. And we're also going to zoom out and look at it from a plan of redemption perspective. And it's actually going to speak into practical application of what now? What do we do now as we approach the end of this age? This was one of the verses I mentioned last week, Proverbs 10:10. Whoever winks the eye causes trouble. So this is someone who has unequal weights and measures. They will say, this is good, but, we'll ignore this thing over here. We'll ignore this at the expense of something. It's actually a form of biblical hypocrisy. A babbling fool or a veal will come to ruin. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life. Why? Because the righteous will have overcome at the heart level. They will have biblical wisdom inside of them, and this will flow forth from them. And the mouth will speak from the overflow of the heart. And so in the case of the wise, it will be the wise will speak from a place of wisdom and from overcoming and from the word being written on their hearts. However, the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. So there's deception. There's this whitewashing that goes on. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. And so I've put this note here for verse 12. The opposite of love is hate. And so you're seeing now another nuance, another characteristic of a fool. A fool will say that they love Yah and they love their brother, but the reality will be that their actions display that they actually hate them. Remember that a fool does not fear Yah. And as a result, they will cut down everybody that's made in the image of Yah. They've placed themselves on the high and lofty throne, so to speak. And so their foolishness and their actions and their words actually show that they hate Yah and their brother. Think of Messiah's words, they hated me without a cause. Who was he speaking of? The Romans? He wasn't, was he? He was speaking of the religious authorities who claimed to follow and serve and ultimately love Elohim. But they hated him because they'd put themselves on the throne. And so someone that loves their brother or sister will want them to cross the finish line. They will go, come on, brother, pick yourself up. Yes, you've committed an offense. You've committed a transgression. You may have even committed an offense against me, but I want you to succeed. Whereas a fool will uncover his brother. He will uncover his sister. And when you see someone uncovering somebody else, what you are seeing is that they actually hate them at the heart level, which means that they hate Elohim. Remember what the book of 1 John says, that he who claims to love Elohim, let me rephrase that. If you can't love your brother who you can see, how are you going to love Elohim who you cannot see? And if your words and actions are showing that you in fact hate your brother, that means you hate Elohim. I'm going to make a really bold, cutting statement. There's a lot of people in the body that claim to serve and follow Elohim, but their words and actions would say otherwise. Their words and actions would actually say that they hate him. Now, this is not happening consciously. This is actually the definition of delusion and folly. It's a bold statement to make. You know, look, all of us came from a place, from whatever religious background we came from, we served and loved Elohim with the best of our understanding, did we not? And then the Ruach pricked our hearts and we went, oh boy, I may have been walking contrary to the one I claim to love. We've all been there. So I'm not speaking from a place of, let's beat these people down. I come as a guilty party, having been guilty of this. But back to the point, love covers all offenses. If you have a brother or sister uncovering the shame of his brother or sister, they're actually hating them, which means, and if they hate their brother or sister, they will hate Messiah. Think of the rebellion that will occur at the end of the millennial reign. Do you think they love Messiah? No. Proverbs 18, verse 1. Whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. So this is the fool. They cannot heed reproof. They won't heed the reproof. They think they know better. And you get this lone wolf mentality being spoken of here in the book of Proverbs. Someone that chooses to be a law unto themselves. They're actually seeking their own desire. And so when you see people that struggle with a community dynamic, look, if someone's struggling with a community dynamic, it's either because they're distrustful because they've been hurt in the past. Okay. And that's a very real situation and one that can be worked with. I'm not speaking of those. Let's put that group to one side. But those that think they know better, those that put themselves forward as the fountain of all knowledge, right? Always learning, never coming to the intimate knowledge of truth. And they will not humble themselves and submit and work within a community dynamic. Proverbs is saying they're seeking their own desire. In fact, they've made themselves Elohim. Let's remember that our king has said, this will be a team game. And if you cannot handle that, do you really love your king? A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but in uncovering his own heart. His own heart. Now, the word here for uncovering, the root word is galah, okay? Now, galah means to uncover and to denude. So literally to strip naked. And it's used especially in a disgraceful sense. So that uncovering shame. Think honor or shame. It's shameful to walk around naked, right? Even in the physical shadow picture, you're exposing yourself. It would be shameful for you to strip naked a brother or sister in the physical typology, right? But what's this pointing to? What's this pointing to? You know, what we just covered, love covers all offenses. Whereas hate will strip a brother naked emotionally and spiritually. And, you know, you see this in certain denominations where, you know, someone is put to the front of the congregation and they literally uncover their shame. And when we go through today, you have to understand that in biblical Hebrew, this idea of uncovering one's shame, when you were to uncover shame, literally the Hebrew behind it would be to strip them naked. You are uncovering their nakedness. And today so, you know, the word nakedness is also used figuratively for shame. So you can uncover someone's nakedness and put them in a shameful place by doing so. So uncovering nakedness and uncovering shame is synonymous in biblical Hebrew. And here it says that a fool will actually uncover their own heart. They're displaying their shameful behavior in front of others. And as we're going to see, not only do they uncover their own shame, they uncover everybody else's, which is another reason why they're a liability to a community setting. Now, here's what's really interesting. The word gala, put this in the back of your mind for today. It means to reveal. It can be used in a positive sense, to reveal something that is hidden in terms of a positive sense, but it can also mean to exile. And the reason it means to exile is because in ancient times, when a people group were exiled, they would be captured and they would be stripped naked physically, and they would chain them up in this long line naked and basically parade them back to their exile, to the place they were being exiled to. And they used to, the ancient cultures used to do this to put shame onto a culture. They were saying, look, you can't even keep your own clothes on you because we're stronger than you. And so keep this in the back of your mind. We're going to see this parallel again, and the biblical Hebrew language shows this, that you can expose someone's nakedness, which means to put them in a shameful place. So uncovering nakedness, uncovering shame are one and the same. Hence the title to today's teaching, Uncovering Shame. A fool will uncover their own shame and put other people in a place of uncovering shame. Slander uncovers shame. Remember, just on a simple thing, can you believe what so-and-so did or said? They may even be speaking the truth, but taking it out of context. And what you're doing there is uncovering someone's shame. You're exposing the person you're slandering to whoever you're speaking to. You're uncovering their nakedness. You're making them vulnerable. For lack of wood, the fire goes out, and where there is no whisperer, quarreling ceases. A charcoal to hot embers, and wood to fire, so is a quarrelsome man for kindling strife. The words of a whisperer are like delicious morsels. They go down to the inner parts of the body. And I use this passage to show this is how slander will defile a community at the heart level, because the slanderer will put out their slander, and then someone will hear that and they will take it to heart. And as a result, some unfortunate brother or sister, this party, has been exposed. And then this causes division within a body. It causes unrest and strife. And now you have people that have... They've been defiled at the conscience and heart level because they're putting a brother or sister in a place of shame, usually unwarranted place of shame. And so this is how slander spreads. It's like a cancer in the body. And so this is why Proverbs says, essentially, if you remove the whisperer and slanderer, you watch the infection go away. And this is why the Apostle Paul would say, when you've removed someone, have nothing to do with them. Because there's very good reason why someone's been removed to the body, because they're a liability to others and they will spread the infection within the body. And one of the most dangerous things I've seen is someone being removed from a community, and then you get the rescuer go behind the scenes and give an ear to the person being removed, and they themselves end up being infected by the sob story, and then that infection spreads through the community where this person was removed. This is crucial to understand regarding body dynamics. It goes on to say, like silver dross covering an earthen vessel, are fervent lips with an evil heart. Now, remember, we are made of earth, right? We're made from the dust of the ground. And in Elohim's house, there are vessels of honor and there are vessels of dishonor. And this particular earthen vessel is covered in silver dross, which means it has silver, but it's tainted silver. Remember what we covered in part 1, that there's going to be rejected silver, right? That the house of Israel and Judah were put into the refinery, and no matter how much they were refined, the silver was not refined. And as a result, they will be rejected silver. Okay? This is what this is speaking of. An earthen vessel, a vessel in the house, and it's actually a vessel of dishonor. Why? Because it has not got rid of the dross of its life. Whoever hates disguises himself with his lips and harbors deceit in his heart. Now remember, a biblical fool by their actions and words essentially hate their brother and hate Elohim, but they will disguise it. They will say all the right things. They will say all the right things, but you stand back and you look critically and you think, hang on a minute, why does bad fruit seem to follow them wherever they go? When he speaks graciously, believe him not, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. And we know the 7 things that Yah hates, and they're all to do with sowing strife and division in the body. And the fool will be at the root of this. But they will be saying all the right things. Think of the warnings, always learning, never coming to the knowledge of truth. These foolish questions that we're to reject, questions actually about the scriptures, that all they do is breed strife and division. Things aren't always what they seem. Just because someone is speaking smooth things doesn't mean that their heart is in a good place. And unfortunately, I've seen so many people, associate themselves or even have communities with people, and they haven't tested people. They haven't played the long game, as I mentioned in the First Timothy series. And these people said and did all the right things, but that was very short-lived. And over a period of time, the cracks started to show. And now they're reaping the consequences of fellowshipping with fools. Though his hatred be covered with deception, his wickedness will be exposed in the assembly. This word, galah, to uncover, to denude, and to exile. So give it time. Eventually, these smooth words and actions that appease people will eventually start to show cracks. And eventually, especially if you have good servant leadership going on and accountability and discipleship going on, this foolishness will be exposed. It will be uncovered more often than not by the fool themselves. Right? Remember that a fool uncovers his own nakedness, his own shameful behavior. But sometimes there comes a point when a fool is causing so much disruption within a body of believers that the leadership actually have to uncover it for all to see. There is that place, and it's a sad place. It's a sad time when servant leadership has to go there. I've put here, Zion will be exalted. Let's read the proverb here. By the blessing of the upright, a city is exalted, but by the mouth of the wicked, or think the foolish, it is overthrown. Remember that a fool, by their many words and actions, will sow division, strife, and a house that is divided, or in this example, a city that is divided, shall not stand. Now think of this in terms of the shadow picture of Zion, the New Jerusalem. We know that only those who will overcome will be allowed to enter the gates of the New Jerusalem. And the book of Revelation says outside are the dogs, the immorals, the spiritually adulterous. Speaking of believers, okay, those that didn't overcome, you could argue biblical fools outside of the dogs and the fools. And so there's going to be a city that is coming. And the thought, or what the question I want to ask is, do you want to be able to enter into that city? Because only a chosen or treasured possession will be allowed to enter in Mount Zion. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, or the Hebrew will say has no heart. But a man of understanding remains silent. Again, love covers a multitude of sins, does it not? Whoever goes about slandering exposes, denudes, uncovers secrets. But he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. Again, think of uncovering someone's shame or nakedness. This is the language that's being used. Now, the word here for trustworthy is the word aman, which is the root word of emunah, which is the word for faith or faithfulness. This is someone who is dependable, someone who you can trust. You know, people will say that the word aman means belief. You believe in something because it's trustworthy, okay? You can hang your hat on it, so to speak. Well, how do you know someone is trustworthy unless you've walked with them at a deep and intimate level and you've played that long game with them? And so the fool, whoever goes about uncovering themselves and other people, they're actually unfaithful and untrustworthy. Right? This is what the Proverbs is saying. The one who is trustworthy in spirit will actually seek to guard someone's integrity and to keep them in a place of honor by not uncovering them in front of others. But the fool will actually uncover everybody and reveal secrets. And therefore, you cannot, they're unfaithful. Remember, they hate Elohim and they hate their brother. And they're untrustworthy. Think of the parable. Who is the wise and trustworthy or faithful manager that the master will entrust over his house? A fool will not be put in a position of governing in the age to come. Hence, outside of the dogs, outside of the immoral. Which will you be? Because verse 13 here is giving you a key attribute of who will be able to enter those gates. Those that seek to keep their brothers and sisters covered and thus in a place of honor. Let's now, these verses were there to show that a fool will uncover, will strip naked himself and others, figuratively speaking. Let's look at some passages in the Torah regarding nakedness, where this word galah is being used. None of you shall approach any one of his close relatives to uncover galah, nakedness. I am Yah. And so these are the laws regarding sexual purity. So we're going to see this word galah now being used within a context of sexual purity. So think faithfulness or its opposite, adultery. Okay, and relationships or types of uncovering that should not be occurring. Leviticus 20:11, if a man lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. So you can see why the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians was like, guys, what are you doing? Why are you entertaining this stuff? Do you not know what the Torah says? Now notice here that not only are the guilty parties, so the adulterer and the wife, the unfaithful wife here, not only are they to be put to death, but their blood is to be upon them. i.e., you are reaping what you sowed. But it's not only that. By this behavior, they've actually uncovered the nakedness of the father. So people always focus on the adulterous ones, but people miss the fact that this behavior is actually putting the father, in this instance, in a place of dishonor and shame. You're uncovering the party that is not guilty. And people miss this. It's not just the adulterers that are acting shamefully and uncovering themselves. In the process of their actions, they're uncovering or exposing the party that is not guilty. Leviticus 20:17, if a man takes his sister, a daughter of his father or a daughter of his mother, and sees her nakedness and sees his nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace. It is shameful, and they shall be cut off in the sight of the children of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness and shall bear his iniquity. So nakedness and shame is being uncovered all over the place here. It's bringing shame to it. So what the Torah is saying is that through these illicit relationships, you're actually uncovering people's nakedness and uncovering shame. Think of this in the spiritual sense. Who are you keeping fellowship with, and how are you going about it? If a man lies with a woman during her menstrual period and uncovers her nakedness, he has made naked her fountain, and she has uncovered the fountain of her blood. Both of them shall be cut off among their people. So think of this in a way of, in the spiritual sense, of not having fellowship or intimate relationship with someone while they're in a state of uncleanness spiritually. Because remember that in the physical shadow picture, a woman's time of the month and menstrual period put her in a place of Levitical impurity. And so you weren't to have relations during this time. Well, what is the spiritual picture of this? Do not have intimate relationship with someone while they're in a state of spiritual uncleanness. And now you have to ask, well, what is spiritual defilement? I would argue biblical folly is one of them. Do not have intimate relationship with a biblical fool, lest you become unclean yourself spiritually. Do you see what the Torah is showing? Because if not, you're uncovering shame. You're exposing spiritual nakedness in the process. It's shameful behavior, and everybody is being uncovered in the process, which is not what Elohim wants, because it causes division and strife. It goes on to say, you shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister or of your father's sister, for that is to make naked one's relative. They shall bear their iniquity. And remember that love covers all transgressions. It doesn't expose them. It's foolish behavior that uncovers. If a man lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They shall bear their sin. They shall die childless. So because of their actions, they will reap the consequences and have the bad fruit. But unfortunately, the uncle, the not guilty party, has been uncovered in the process of the guilty party's actions. This is shameful. It causes strife. It causes division within a body of believers. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless. Now, look, let's put this in the plan of redemption perspective. There's a groom, our king, and he has a bride. Now, unfortunately, his bride has been whoring around, hasn't she? right now. And unfortunately, to make it worse, has been with another woman, right? The harlot, whose nakedness has been exposed in the picture. But this is serious. Elohim wants a bride that is not going to uncover his nakedness, dare I say it, his vulnerability. Yah's making himself vulnerable by having a bride sat on the throne. Think of why he's going to such great lengths to refine a bride worthy to sit on the throne beside him. She will not uncover him. I mean, this is serious stuff, and it's given to us here in the Torah through these shadow picture, sexual laws. But then the book of Proverbs is giving us a deeper insight as to how biblical folly plays into this. And we've seen how biblical folly and its counterpart, opposite counterpart, wisdom, plays a big part as to whether someone will be a treasured possession or not. Let's look at some of the warnings to the house of Israel. Ezekiel 13. My hand will be against the prophets who see false visions and who give lying divination. So this is within the house, right? Believing context. They shall not be in the council of my people. I believe, again, this is an allusion to the governance in the age to come. They will not be in the council. Remember that to be in the council of a people is a position of authority and a trusted position. These false prophets, nope, you will be denied authority in the house of Israel. Nor will they be enrolled in the register of the house of Israel. I mean, this is serious. Ezekiel would say elsewhere that when it comes to the regathering, go to Ezekiel 20, verse 37. And there's 5 verses there that says that during the regathering, the rebellious ones, they will be regathered, but they will not be allowed into the land. I mean, this is serious stuff. Think rewards and losses, having an inheritance, having no inheritance. Nor shall they enter the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am Yah. Precisely because they have misled my people, saying peace when there is no peace. And because when the people build a wall, these prophets smear it with whitewash. Ooh. What's the warning that Yeshua gives to the Pharisees? They whitewash their tombs. They look great on the outside, but inside it's filled with dead men's bones. Spiritual adultery, foolishness, uncovering the shame, their own and others, and ultimately exposing Elohim's nakedness. I mean, this is serious. Look, this dynamic of, I'll use a modern expression of it, but there's atheists in the world today that have rejected Elohim because of the bad witness given by the religious, because the only thing that the atheist has seen is a leavened understanding of the faith. And as a result, they've rejected Elohim. What you see here is that those leavened with Mystery Babylon, with religion, they've actually shamed Elohim to the atheist. They've exposed Elohim's nakedness, if that makes sense, because rather than being faithful to Elohim, they've been sleeping with this harlot, and now the atheist is going, well, if this is what the faith is, I want nothing to do with it. I mean, this is serious. Elohim will not have that kind of behavior sat on the throne with him. I hope people are connecting the dots here. So these false prophets, remember that at this time, the house of Judah was in full-blown spiritual adultery, same as in the time of Yeshua. And rather than repenting for the shenanigans going on within the house, let's just smear it with whitewash. Think of, again, Proverbs, a fool, though he speaks good words, right? It seems good, don't believe him, because his words are wrapped up in deceit that will eventually expose them and you and Elohim. Say to those who smear it with whitewash that it shall fall. There shall be a deluge of rain, and you, O great hailstones, will fall, and a stormy wind break out. And when the wall falls, will it not be said to you, where is the coating with which you smeared it? I believe this is a warning for at the time, but that this is going to be a typology of what will happen in the Great Tribulation. There's going to be people that have a leavened faith, and it will be essentially said to them, where's your religion got you now? How is it working for you now? Where is it? Where's the fruit? And I will break down. Notice who's breaking down the wall of whitewash. It's Yah. I will break down the wall that you have smeared with whitewash and bring it down to the ground so that its foundation will be laid bare. It will be galad. It will be uncovered, stripped. When it falls, you shall perish in the midst of it, and you shall know that I am Yah. And so what you're seeing here is that the house of Israel were acting shamefully, right? We know that they were doing all kinds of shameful things, and they'd fallen into spiritual adultery. We're going to read in a second how the house of Israel, the picture that's given is that they had exposed or uncovered their own nakedness by sleeping around with the nations, figuratively, like spiritually speaking. And what Yah is saying is, because I warned you, because you've been exposing your shame and bringing my name into disrepute to the nations where you have gone, you're not only shaming you, you're shaming me. I'm going to expose your nakedness now because you will not repent. You have sowed shame, you will reap shame. And I will expose to the nations what you've done. And we see the warnings that, you know, the nations will look at the judgment that's fallen upon the house of Israel, and it will be said that Yah has judged them because they've gone around whoring. And so you see here, people are hopefully, where does biblical folly lead? Folly will lead to pride, delusion, complacency, which will eventually lead to spiritual adultery. And if you're a biblical fool, you will not heed accountability. Hence, the house of Israel did not repent when the prophets came. And where does it lead now? Judgment. To the point where Yah goes, enough. You're exposing yourself and you're bringing my name into shame. I'm going to expose you. This is why Yah says, I'm not doing this for your sake, but for my name's sake. Because Yah is the party that's not guilty in this. But because his people have been whoring with other gods, Elohim is being brought into a place of shame through the guilty party's actions. And we're the guilty party, not him. Ezekiel 36. Thus says Yah Elohim, because your lust was poured out and your nakedness uncovered, this word, galah. Again, this is the same word used, that a fool will uncover their brother and sisters, and they will uncover or expose themselves. Because your lust was poured out and your nakedness uncovered in your whorings with your lovers and with all your abominable idols, and because of the blood of your children that you gave to them, it got so bad that they were sacrificing their children to these false gods. Therefore, behold, I will gather all your lovers with whom you took pleasure, all those you loved and all those you hated. I will gather them against you from every side and will uncover your nakedness to them, that they may see all your nakedness. And so Yah's essentially saying, oh, you enjoy sleeping with Babylon and with Assyria. Fine. I'll give them over to you. I'll give you over to them. Have at it. Let's go all the way. Let's go all the way. But you see here that Yah's saying essentially, you've shamed yourself. You've shamed me. You've uncovered yourself. By virtue of that, you're uncovering me. Let's now uncover your shame so that all can see it. You've enjoyed uncovering yourself so much. Have at it. Let's go all the way. Let's strip you naked. And this is where biblical folly eventually leads. And I will judge you as women who commit adultery and shed blood are judged, and bring upon you the blood of wrath and jealousy. Now, when we were looking at the verses in Leviticus, what did it say? That if you uncover someone else's nakedness, or you uncover your own nakedness with illicit relationships, what did it say? Their blood shall be upon them. You will bear the consequences of your actions. Now, in the shadow picture, it said you will put to death or you will die childless. Now, what here in the bigger picture, because the house of Israel was uncovering her nakedness and other people's nakedness in the process, what is your blood shall be upon you? You will be judged. You will be scattered. You will be exiled to your lovers. You will bear the consequences of your whoring. It goes on. Was not your sister Sodom a byword in your mouth in the day of your pride? You know, again, oh, look at Sodom and how it was judged. That can't be us. Surely not. We're the people of Elohim. Same behavior today, nothing new under the sun. Before your wickedness was uncovered, now you have become an object of reproach for the daughters of Syria and all those around her, and for the daughters of the Philistines, all those around who you despise. Remember what I said, a fool will cut people down with their words and place themselves above the people they cut down. This is exactly what you're reading. That the house of Judah, in this particular case, was putting Sodom and the Philistines below them. But yet, in their arrogant pride, we're busy sleeping around with all the other nations and false idols. You're seeing the fruit of biblical folly play out, and it leads to uncovering shame and nakedness. You bear the penalty of your lewdness and your abominations, declares Yah. Again, the same thing that we saw in the Torah. They will bear the shame of their actions. They will bear their sin. It is upon them. So let's see how this actually played out. The nations shall know that the house of Israel went into captivity. The word, there's one Hebrew word for the phrase went into captivity. It's this word, galah, uncovered. It literally says the house of Israel became uncovered. And so what you're seeing in the Hebrew is actually wordplay. You're getting Hebrew wordplay because remember that when a nation took another nation into exile, they stripped them naked. And what Yah is essentially saying, this is the word pun that's going on in the Hebrew. Because you uncovered yourself, I will uncover you and you will be uncovered into captivity. Do you see what's going on in the Hebrew? And the book of Proverbs is saying that fools uncover themselves and everybody else. Well, allow that fruit to play out. What happens? Out you go. What does Paul say? Warn them once, warn them twice, out they go. Exile. This happened at a national level, a whole people group, exile. Why? Because, look, you know when the house of Israel are about to enter the land, what's one of the warnings given to them? When you build houses and fortified cities and you start getting, I'm going to paraphrase, you start getting comfortable, right? You start getting comfortable and you start to think, by the power of my hand, I did this. And you start to get arrogant and prideful. What happens? You start to get complacent. And then that plays out. It starts to turn into foolishness. And foolishness then leads to you start uncovering yourself and everybody else. And unfortunately, Elohim's name gets dragged into the mud. So you're now uncovering him, and he's not guilty. And then you do not heed accountability. You do not heed reproof. And because the fools are not taken out, it infects everybody else. And unfortunately, in this case, this happened. The whole nation became infected. And folly led to complacency, to uncoveredness, to exposing. And Yah said, enough. Let your shame come upon you. I'm trying to refine you. It's not working. Out you go. You enjoy being naked and whoring around with all the idols and all the nations, fine. Have at it. Let's go all the way. In fact, you will be stripped naked and you will be sent into captivity. And it's all the same word in the Hebrew, galah, to uncover, to denude, to exile. I dealt with them according to their uncleanness and their transgressions and hid my face from them. This is the language you find back in Leviticus 18 regarding the laws of sexual purity. Their guilt shall be upon them. Amos 7, therefore thus says Yah, your wife shall be a prostitute in the city. This is the warnings for the northern kingdom. And your sons and your daughters shall fall by the sword, and your land shall be divided up with a measuring line, and you yourself shall die in an unclean land. And Israel shall surely go into exile away from its land. So that this phrase in the Hebrew is two words. It literally says galo yigle. And so you see the word galah, this root word galah, being used twice, but in two different forms. You have galo, yigle. And when this is essentially, in Hebrew, you see this, they'll use the same word twice to make it an emphatic statement. So this is why not only is it, you shall go into exile, you shall surely go into exile. You're definitely going. And so, but again, it's this Hebrew wordplay. You're going to be uncovered. It's figurative language for literally what Assyria, for the northern kingdom, would strip them naked and lead them off into captivity. Not only was it the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, the house of Judah. Judah has gone into exile. Again, this word, galah. Judah has been stripped naked. Why? Because she uncovered her own nakedness, everybody else's nakedness, and in the process exposed Elohim and brought the non-guilty party into shame to the other nations. And this is why we even have atheists today, because those that claim the faith have been acting shamefully, uncovering themselves, uncovering those they're sleeping with, and in the process, Yah's name gets dragged through the mud. So this kind of beckons the question, what will happen to those that do not repent? Remember earlier, we had that thing that A city is blessed by the blessing of the upright, but it will come to ruin by the mouth of fools. And I said, Zion will be exalted. Who's outside Zion? The fools, the spiritually adulterous, the dogs, the ravenous, the wolves, those that did not repent. It's a form of exile. They're not allowed into the New Jerusalem. Again, what we read in Ezekiel, those that do not repent will not be in the council of the people, nor will they be in the register of the house of Israel. They will not be allowed into the inheritance. Even in the millennial reign, there's a form of exile for what we do in this time domain. Take, again, parable of the wedding feast. Who's outside weeping and gnashing their teeth? It's a form of exile. Out you go. In Isaiah 47, this is speaking of the judgment of Babylon, okay? And this passage is paraphrased by the book of Revelation. So Isaiah is speaking to the nation of Babylon, and that becomes the typology for Babylon the harlot, okay? Mystery Babylon, as it's commonly known. This spirit of religious seduction. So when you read this regarding the nation of Babylon, think, you know, the harlot that rides the beast, you know, the all the kings of the earth have committed fornication with. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sitting in the dust is a place of mourning. Those who mourned in ancient Mesopotamian cultures would go in the dust. They'd wear sackcloth and ashes and pour dust on their head. Okay, this is what this is speaking of. Sit on the ground without a throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for you shall no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind flour. Put off your veil. Uncover your veil. It's literally, it's saying uncover yourself, expose your shame, strip off your robe, uncover your legs, pass through the rivers. We know, look, it's because Babylon was used to judge the house of Judah, but then because Babylon treated Judah harshly and did not repent themselves, they end up being exposed, so to speak, stripped. Mystery. So if this is the typology for what would become Mystery Babylon, we are told, come out of her, my people. We know in the book of Revelation that the harlot will be destroyed. Yah will put it into the minds of the kings of the earth to burn her with fire. Okay? If you're still whoring in the spiritual whorehouse, it's going to be judged. It's going to be uncovered. It's going to be exposed. Do not be found in it, is essentially what Yah's saying. Your nakedness shall be uncovered, and your disgrace shall be seen. I will take vengeance, and I will spare no one. No one. This is why the warning of come out of her, my people, should be very sobering. I mean, it should be enough that if we partake of Mystery Babylon, if we partake of spiritual adultery, it's only a matter of time, right? If we hang around with those people that rubs off on us, that should be enough of a warning. But if that's not enough of a warning, let this be. Because if you're found in the spiritual whorehouse when it's judged, Yah's going to spare no one. No one. That's an absolute statement. So, where does biblical folly lead? Let's put this into perspective, right? Okay, part one, there's going to be a treasure possession, and she will have wisdom. And part two was, well, if you don't have wisdom, what are you? You're a fool. Today, we looked at what happens to when you don't repent of your folly. Now, I know it's a pretty sobering teaching, but what we've covered today is actually going to serve as a typology for what we're going to cover in part 4 next week, because there's a spiritual, weightier matter that we need to look at, because what we've read today actually applies to us very much today. Not only within an end of this age perspective, but in a perspective of what now? You know, are we uncovering our brothers? Are we uncovering our sisters? Are we dragging Elohim's name through the mud? Now, we've looked at where this led to with the house of Israel, with northern kingdom, southern kingdom, being Gilad, so to speak, uncovered and sent into exile. Next week, we're going to look at this thing of, are we uncovering Elohim and his treasure? Next week's teaching, today was called Uncovering Shame. Next week will be called Uncovering his treasure. Uncovering, exposing, shaming. And so we're going to take what we've covered today and we're going to go right back to the garden, actually. We're going to look at, are we exposing our king and put it in by our shameful behavior of how we deal with one another? Are we shaming Elohim? So let's stop here for today. Today was kind of more shadow picture stuff. Next week, we'll take what we've covered today and really take a plan of redemption perspective on it. But yeah, let's stop here and do some Q&A. Amen.